coronavirus infections are increasing daily in the country. The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases stands at nearly 207,000. So is there anything that people can do to ensure their bodies are healthy enough to fight off the virus? We try and get answers to some of those questions. We're joined by the University of Cape Town's Respiratory Medicine Head, Professor Keertan Dheda. Professor Dheda, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So when we talk about this disease, they often talk about how it affects your lungs. How do you make sure that your lungs go on for longer just before you even have something happen to you?
Yeah, so I think, the big question is, how do you minimize risk really? And there are two parts to that. The first is, mitigating your risk factors for COVID-19, and the second, and you've been talking about it the whole day, is non-pharmaceutical interventions. So firstly, addressing risk factors. So I think the first thing to say is stop smoking. If you're smoking, stop smoking. Smoking is associated with increased susceptibility to a number of different types of pneumonia, including influenza, tuberculosis, and so forth. And even if you stop smoking, even within a few weeks, you can improve the status of your respiratory immune system. The other big risk factor for poor outcomes in COVID-19 is diabetes. If you're over the age of 45, get yourself tested for diabetes. Or if you're under the age of 45 and have a risk factor like being overweight, test yourself for diabetes. If you're known to be diabetic, make sure that your control is optimized. Get that checked out. If your diabetic control is poor, that's a major risk factor for poor outcome and likely for also getting COVID-19. The same would go for high blood pressure. Make sure that's well controlled. If you don't know your HIV status, it's a good idea to get yourself tested. And if you know that you're HIV infected and you've been avoiding it, make sure that you get onto HIV antibiotics or antiretrovirals, because that would greatly mitigate your susceptibility to getting COVID-19 and also a poor outcome if you do end up getting it. The other risk factor, which unfortunately, as the old adage goes, you can't choose when you were born or your parents. So if you're over the age of 60, you've got to take particular care. You were just talking about cinemas and things like that opening. But obviously, if you of advanced age, you are more likely to contract COVID-19, and if you do have a poor outcome. So be sensible about it and, avoid unnecessary gatherings, going out, visiting people, and so forth. And then there's the non-pharmaceutical interventions, which you've been talking about and everyone's talking about, the hand hygiene, social distancing, avoiding large gatherings and so forth where people congregate. That's particularly important. So I think if you follow, those basic steps, then you should be okay. There are lots of other things being punted around on WhatsApp and on the internet, including buying small oxygen cylinders and special types of herbal remedies and various types of vitamins. I wouldn't advise that one gets those. Many of these vitamin supplements, including vitamin C, have been tried with a number of viral illnesses like influenza, and they don't really work. One thing that is talked about is vitamin D supplementation. Vitamin D is thought to be very important to augment the immune response to many respiratory tract infections and different types of pneumonia, including bacterial pneumonia and TB. We're not sure if that's the case for COVID-19, but if you think you're vitamin D deficient or you know that you're vitamin D deficient, then it would be sensible to supplement with this particular vitamin for a few months, especially during this COVID-19 period. So in a nutshell, I think fresh air, sunlight, moderate amount of exercise, a balanced diet, and mitigating your risk factors, and sticking to the non-pharmaceutical interventions. I think if you follow those basics, you should be fine.
You touched on DIY hacks a little bit earlier on. Some people saying to take eucalyptus and put it on a scarf and put it around your nose. Does something like that work?
No, there's, we know from other respiratory tract infections and viral infections like influenza that does not work. And there's absolutely no evidence or, factual base to reason that it might work. So I would not do that.
Let's leave it there. Thank you very much for that clarity. And that was University of Cape Town Respiratory Medicine Head, Professor Keertan Dheda.